Hello and welcome to this month's episode of Africa's Boardroom. I'm Stephen Gagnon. Now, for the past few years, companies have excelled by treating customers as markets of one, offering them personalized buying experiences. Yet when it comes to managing talent, most companies still use the one-size-fits-all HR practice. Well, with today's dynamic workforce, shouldn't organizations be turning their customization capabilities on themselves, especially when it comes to managing their own people? Well, joining me in studio to give us their insights into the concept of revolutionizing talent management through customization are Luan Lubbe, Talent and Organizational Performance Lead at Accenture South Africa, Garen Marcroft, Senior Manager at Accenture UK, and Conrad Steyn, he's co-founder and Director of Business Application and Information Services at Barnstone. Welcome everybody, thanks for coming in tonight. Luan, I'm going to start with you. Workforce of one, how and why should organizations customize their HR functions for individuals?
If you think of the workforces of today, you have such a multiplicity of talent in the organization. Today we have more women in organizations than ever before. You have plus minus 4 generations in organizations. You have greater diversity, and no longer is it just appropriate or suitable to in fact offer all employees the same value proposition, the same employee value proposition. So the way to look at that is to say, similar to your introduction that you in fact did, is if you're going to do segmentation of the marketplace in a very similar way, segment your employees, segment your workforce in a way that therefore the employee value proposition speaks to them and engages them in the organization and offers them a career that they believe is valuable and that they believe they can influence. There are different ways to segmenting that workforce. You could look at workforce segmentation in itself, using very much the same approaches as you would in market segmentation. You could look at offering modular choices to employees, where you have a range of choices that employees could then choose from. You could look at defining broad and simple rules that employees within those broad and simple rules could define how they would, for example, like to learn, what compensation packages they'd like, what career paths they'd like to follow within the organization. And then you could have where the employee, in fact, would personalize their value proposition, much like the modular choice, but where the employee defines it as opposed to the employer defining it.
We're going to go through some of those options a little bit later again. Conrad, in the meantime, let me get your opinion. Should we be segmenting our workforces? Can't we treat employees all the same?
I think you've got to start off with as an individual. Each person is an individual. So even Luan was talking about, women and different criteria and different ages and so on. I think the fundamental is that you've got to see each employee as an individual. Absolutely. And start from that point of view. Yeah.
Don't HR practices as they are, though, treat employees as individuals? Yes, you do have the same basic working conditions, but yeah, you get different salary increases. Some people have different hours. There is flexi time within organizations. Don't we already give some leeway there?
I think it depends on what type of organization you're talking about. I think it also depends on quite a number of factors. Some organizations have got a very strict culture, and I think culture, I was going to ask you about culture later on during the question, but I think culture also plays a major role. I think some organizations are more prone to say, we'll treat you as an individual. Others are saying, well, it's a cookie cutter, and it's a cookie cutter type job, and you all fit into the same type of scenario.
Karen, how does this fit in with training and development within an organization or learning? Do we have to change everything now? Do different people have to have different training and development skills?
But I think it's more about how we use the concepts to help individuals. It's a great point being brought up about individuals. People learn differently, so we need to kind of adapt our training, learning solutions to allow people to learn the way they learn. So rather than just seeing classroom training as of old, we're seeing kind of e-learning, collaborative technologies using podcasting, mobile phones, learning by different methods to allow people to learn the way they want to learn rather than being lectured, which we know is not the most effective way to learn. So I think it's about giving people choice, which allows them to be the individual and learn the best way they can.
Luan, who's meant to benefit here? Is it the organization or the individual?
Without any doubt, both parties. So the organization will benefit from the enhanced employee engagements, that you will find the greater levels of productivity, the greater levels of retention, all of which save the organization enormous costs. But the employee also benefits in that the employee has a better experience, has better career options, can learn at their own pace in the way that they want to learn, and they feel valued. the end of the day, you know, you and I are different people, but yet often organizations will treat us as exactly the same way. We learn in different ways, yet we are forced to learn in the same way. If you could learn or perform your role in the way that plays to your strengths, your attributes, you're going to feel that the experience thereof is more value adding to you, and at the end of the day, that value add that you have as the individual will translate into enhanced performance within the organization.
There's going to be a case of there could be too many options. You know, when you go to a restaurant and there's a menu with 10 or 15 pages, you actually can't decide. Whereas if you've got to go to a restaurant where there's only 10
choices,
options,
yeah.
and they are all very
Yeah.
good options, it's much easier
Yeah.
to decide.
No doubt.
So I'd be interested to hear your opinion in terms of you know, if you, or my view is, if you make it too complex, and also if your worker is not adapted to the level of the worker is not adapted to the options. You know, because you get the knowledge type worker, and you get other workers that's not as educated. And I think if you make it too complex, you could actually run into trouble with trying to make, you know, segment those
Yeah.
bands too thin.
I think, Conrad, that's a very good point. I think that segmentation, absolutely, you can't make it too thin. You need to be able to manage it within good boundaries. At the end of the day, the options that you need to provide must still deliver the business results that you want it to deliver. And you must do it within, obviously, the cost constraints that you have. And so you must look at what will work for the organization, but what will also work for the employee, and what will offer the employee the career that will fulfill the employee's career aspirations really within an organization. Now clearly, if you mentioned culture earlier on, if you're in an organization where the culture is such that it's quite defined, quite cookie cutter in its approach, to go from that to multiplicity of choices in one move might be too much for the organization and for the HR function in itself to be able to support. So this is over a period of time. You look at how do you increase those choices so that you can manage it, so that you don't compromise the outcomes. Where you have, for example, workforce segmentation, and where you have offer modular choices, the organization has more control over that. And so for an organization who would move into this to begin with, we would recommend going with workforce segmentation, going with offering a range of modular choices, much like a Happy Meal at McDonald's, where you can buy a Happy Meal and you can have chicken nuggets or the burger, or you could have chips, or you could have the mealies, or whatever the case might be. In a similar way, there are a defined range of choices that the employee can choose from, but it's defined by the employer. When you go into employee-defined personalization, then your ranges become a lot broader. And I think that's when an organization is a bit further down this path, where the organizational culture is such that you have talent workers and knowledge workers who would prefer to work in an environment like that. And again, the same way that, you know, you wouldn't treat all employees the same way, we wouldn't say to every organization, adopt all four approaches. You'd have to adopt what is right for that particular organization.
Karen, would the first step really be setting up the learning function within the HR departments in an organization?
I think one of the ways you can approach the kind of workforce of 1A is through learning, and one of the things that you would need to do is very early on align your learning organisation with business priorities and ensure that learning is sponsored by key executives in the business, and then actually develop training in modular ways to allow people to learn in line with what the business is looking to achieve from those individuals. So I think, yes, that's one way you can actually start to provide choice.
And Conrad, would you suggest this starts out the recruitment process? You're involved in recruitment. Is that something that would appeal to you as a recruiter?
Yeah, I think it's not something that you can do, separate to the rest of the organisation. I think if you see this as a HR type point of view, and that it's purely around recruitment, I think you'll set or you'll create certain expectations with the new employee, which you actually won't be able to fulfil. So I think you've got to really look at how do you structure this through your organisation, and does this fit your organisation's objectives and way of operating before you start doing this.
Are you saying it wouldn't fit every organisation's objectives?
Look, the objectives would be to be a profitable organisation, as one example. So in that sense, if you can make the organisation more profitable through doing this, of course it would actually fit the objectives. I'm saying not all organizations are ready for this type of thing,
Absolutely.
and not all of them have the right culture or the appropriate culture for going this route.
Is this really a change of mindsets, Luann?
It is a change of mindset, but it is also, if you look at a number of years ago, the new term employee value proposition to some organizations were new. To other organizations, it was something that they'd had for many years. And so to Conrad's point, it depends on where they are on that maturity curve of how they view their employees and what they actually offer employees from a talent perspective. Many companies in South Africa have not yet even done talent segmentation, don't have a defined employee value proposition. Those are some of the foundational elements that
So you would need to take those steps first.
Absolutely. Then you get into the customization and treating the workforce as a workforce of one. To start with segmentation, when you haven't got that in place, I think would create confusion and would create a degree of chaos and would make it very expensive to manage. I think from an HR perspective, you need a robust HR function where you have standardized...
An expanded HR function?
No, robust, where you have standardized processes, where you have integrated systems that speak to each other. Often organizations have a talent management system and they have a learning management system. These two don't speak to each other. And it's very difficult to then, part of what contributes to being able to segment your workforce is to do some metrics and analytics. So to look at what are the employee behaviors that we're seeing, what are some of the career paths that people are following, and ideally then you want an integrated system. So again, you're talking about an organization that has a mature HR function, that is stable, that has standardized processes in place already so that they can build a workforce of one segmentation on top of that. Because if you don't have standardization and you build choices on top of that, you can imagine it becomes a little chaotic and a little costly.
So Garen, as an organisation watching this programme today who's interested in a workforce of one, what would the first steps be for that?
I think the first steps for that would be really understanding kind of what your employee value proposition is, as being said, and then understanding the key things that the key parts of how you want to approach the workforce of one. There are a number of different ways of doing it. Modularity is one, so giving employees a number of options, providing learning and knowledge management and collaboration, and giving people the ability to get ahead in their careers. That's one way you can do it through kind of learning. So I think there are many ways you can do it. I think it's about actually attracting the right people into the firm, and if they don't see how they can actually develop their careers and see how they're actually going to be able to work in that firm in an effective way, that it's not going to be attractive for them. So it starts all the way from how you attract people, then all the way through to developing them through their career and providing them the kind of career growth that they're looking for. So yeah, I think there are a number of ways we can look at it.
Well, we're going to a short commercial break. When we return, we continue with our in-depth look at customisation and talent management. Stay tuned.